Good evening, everyone, and Johar. Greetings from the many voices of India's 705 tribal communities. My name is Shalini Kullu, and I come from Khariya tribe in Jharkhand. Welcome to Tribal Futures, the second edition of Tribal Design Forum's month-long celebration of contemporary tribal imagination. Over the next 13 days, we will showcase artists, designers, architects, scholars, and knowledge keepers whose work carries the wisdom and spirit of their communities into today's world. This is a space to see, hear, and feel the power of tribal worldviews and to recognize the deep value of indigenous knowledge in shaping a more caring future. So today we have Anugrah Pandi Lepcha. She is an indigenous researcher passionate about documenting indigenous stories through qualitative research using design as a powerful medium of communication within communities. With specializations in community organizations and development and environmental social work, she has a particular love for participatory rural appraisal, tool, and techniques. She earned her PhD from Visva Bharati Shanti Niketan, where she was profoundly inspired by Rabindranath Tagore's philosophy, the ideals of the Gurukul system of education, and his vision for rural reconstruction have deeply influenced her approach to research, storytelling, and community engagement. Her research has explored themes such as early childhood education and ecological conservation through indigenous knowledge systems. Over the years, professionally, she has worked across diverse settings as a school social worker, psychiatric social worker, and in community healthcare, while actively contributing to a range of community based projects. She is currently working on three books that intervene indigenous storytelling with design. When she is not immersed in conversations about indigenous communities, storytelling, or design, she is likely lost in a book or framing the perfect flat lay. She enjoys overthinking life's big questions over coffee, casually philosophizing while daydreaming, or pretending she is on a nature documentary during her walks. So, welcome, Anugrah. Thank you for coming and speaking on our platform. So, the now floor is all yours.
Thank you, Shalini. Kamrimo, everyone. Kususa abrang anugragum. Go ado plonka kayusa chu klo ongkyong ungmigit mikchuk gunlom kamripusho shurong abi hunghungsa tungka tokchimo. Kamrimo, my name is Anugrah and I come from Kalimpong. I bring greetings from our mountains, hills, rivers, valleys, as well as our communities. Thank you for being here today. I have a presentation to share. Let me just share my screen. Yes. Is my screen, is it on?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. I'll just switch off my video just in case the network is not that great, okay? Reimagining data collection in Indigenous studies. So contemporary research on or in Indigenous studies, it really calls for a reimagining of data collection practices. Now, what do we mean by data collection? When we say data collection, a very simple way of understanding it is going out to the community or reading something, which is again called secondary data, and then you collect it. You collect it according to whatever your need is. Say if you're going to look for ecology, you will go into the communities or you'll read texts that are all about ecology. So the process of going out, looking, finding all these treasures that are out there, we can call it in very simple terms as data collection. Now, today what we're going to look at is we are going to look at how we are going to reimagine this data collection in what only we're going to focus mostly only on Indigenous studies. Now, it is very important that in contemporary times, whenever we are looking at Indigenous studies, whenever we are thinking about data collection in Indigenous studies, we need to take a step back, think, rethink, and this is what I'd like to call reimagining. How can I collect this data in such a way that it is inclusive, and at the same time, it's going to reduce a lot of misinterpretation of whatever the community is telling us. Now, this is also very important from the perspective and point of Indigenous epistemologies as well. Why? Because this allows Indigenous people like you and me to tell a story, to tell our stories in our own voices, where we have that autonomy of what we are telling and what is being told and narrated about us as well. Now, conventional methods often they marginalize or oversimplify Indigenous perspectives, whereas approaches which are grounded in Indigenous knowledge, again followed by community learning as well as community participation and cultural self-determination, they apply and they offer more meaningful insights. Now, I've used a couple of big words. I've used words such as community learning, community participation, cultural self-determination. Now, one way to think about all of this, and a very used terminology, maybe, and I'm going to use it very loosely out here, is it is going to empower the community. When we are talking about communities coming together and participating, when communities are coming together and talking about their own stories in their own words, in their own languages, what does it do? It also empowers the community, which leads to self-determination. Now, within this framework, drawings we see, and today what we're going to look at is drawings. We are going to reimagine data collection through the lens of drawings. Drawings emerge as a vital tool, and we are going to look at drawings as tools of data collection and data interpretation rather than just mere scribbles or artworks that are to be admired, that can be preserved, conserved. Why? Because drawing in itself or art in itself is also a process of knowledge production. Now, far from being simplistic, drawings are storehouses of Indigenous stories. A good example of this will be when we look into all our own weaves. We look into our patterns, they're all telling stories. If you look at paintings like the Warli paintings, you see that they are all telling stories. They're telling stories about what has happened in the community. So what are they doing? They're not only telling stories which are fictional, but they're also recording data about what has happened. They're recording history. They're a form of historical documentation. So drawings are not just mere scribbles anymore. Now, these drawings, they serve both as records as well as living expressions of community. Such, now when we are using drawing, this method, they are inherently what? They're inherently, number one, inclusive, and they foster community participation while affirming community autonomy over what is shared and then how it is interpreted. Now, and then these methods that we have, they highlight region as well as context-based knowledge. This is very important. We've been talking about context-based education. We've been talking about how knowledge is very specific to a region. And knowledge, especially when we look at Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous practices, they're very, very specific to the region, to the ecology, to the community that that particular Indigenous community is a part of. So this is why it highlights context-based knowledge, and then it also recognizes that knowledge cannot be separated from land, it cannot be separated from environment and the history that it belongs to. Drawings are also a crucial form of self-expression, where we do see that a lot of community people have been expressing themselves, have been expressing ideas, have been expressing what they have been going through, their emotions, their stories through the drawings that they have been doing. This enables the articulation of experiences and insights
Apologies, there is some network issue. She'll join in a minute.
Sorry about that. My network just dropped. I'll get right back into the presentation. Can you just please make me a co-host one more time to share it? While we do that, I'll just continue orally. So when we talk about reconceptualizing data collection, it involves interpretation of all of the data, especially that is there in the communities through the lens of art, be it in the knowledge of drawings, be it in the form of paintings, be it in forms of any kind of weaves that are out there. These are now not only looked as forms of aesthetic, but they are to be looked into, understood, and felt the need to know and understand that these actually are data. These are datas, these are stories, these are histories, these are records of the community that we are interacting with. Okay, let me share. So if you have any questions up until now, please let me know while I open my while I open my PPT. If you have any questions, I can address some of them right now. None? Okay. Yeah. So now we look into this is just whatever I shared up until now is just to create a background for what we're doing. So why reimagine data collection? We know and understand that conventional method, they often marginalize indigenous perspectives. Therefore, it is very important that we become a part of the narratives. We are taken into consideration, not just orally, because a lot of researchers and have this whole notion and idea that oral tradition or oral knowledge and information is not that valuable. But that is not so for indigenous communities. And for indigenous communities, there are many communities who do not have scripts, but they have beautiful records of data, records of their communities, records of history, everything woven in their weaves, drawn on their walls. So the conventional method, they often bring their perspective becomes very narrowed down and compartmentalized to only certain things. But indigenous approach to life is a very holistic one. Therefore, data, when we collect data from them, or when we go out there to learn something from them, to know something about them, it is very important that we involve them, and we also broaden our perspective of understanding the communities. Need for approachable approaches grounded in indigenous knowledge and participation. Importance of cultural self-determination in research practices is very important. I would like to talk about this part a little bit more as we go on to forward with the presentation as well, because self-determination is something that even United Nations is talking about, everybody is talking about. And even research, when we're doing research, the ethics that we talk about talks about giving self-determination, giving autonomy to the communities and what they're saying. But how much and how far of it is fulfilled is also something that we as researchers, we as people in working with communities, something that we must introspect upon as well. Then drawings as tools and not as scribbles. They are also vital instruments of knowledge production. If you look at anything today around us also, many times when we want to shorthand anything, we will draw. Now, instead of writing flower, we may want to draw a flower. Instead of writing love, we may draw a heart. And these are ways in which we are drawing certain things to extend certain information. Therefore, it is a tool. Drawings can be looked at as tools. Then, storehouses of indigenous stories and ways of life, as well as knowledge. They serve as records and living expressions of cultural continuity. Now, this is also very important. When we look at indigenous knowledge, or when we look at any of the definitions of indigenous knowledge, then we will always get this one particular sentence or a line or a couple of words that says that indigenous knowledge is continuous knowledge. It is ever growing. Therefore, what we do, what we produce, and because it is constant, it is fluid, all these expressions that are there in the community, that's getting added, that's getting reduced, all of it becomes a part of the living expressions of cultural continuity of all the indigenous communities around us. It is inclusive, community-led research. We are always talking about the research ethics when we use that in terms of working with indigenous communities. We're always looking to and aiming to have an inclusive and community-led research. But if we are ignoring one huge important aspect of the communities, then that also becomes an issue. And one thing we must always remember is this, that when we go into the communities with all our research knowledge or any knowledge that we have, the community may not understand. And that was exactly something that happened with me when I went out for my data collection. The community could not understand a lot of the tools and methodologies that I was talking about. And then it was only then that I realized that to have an inclusive and inclusive research, it has to be community-led, especially when we are working with indigenous communities. Then region and context-based knowledge. This is very important for indigenous communities. I worked on conservation of ecology through indigenous knowledge in the Himalayan region of West Bengal. What and among the Lepcha people, now what the Lepchas here are utilizing to conserve ecology, the same Lepchas in Sikkim, which is just about a maximum of 3 to 4 hours away, they're utilizing a different set of knowledge. Why? It's because the terrain is changing. It's because even if it's the same pine tree that is there, the soil is changing. Everything is changing. So the need of how to conserve it is also changing. This is where we cannot put all indigenous knowledge under the umbrella, one generic umbrella of knowledge system that is going to remain and be the same everywhere we go. It is very, very region-based. Therefore, in a community-led research always gives us context-based knowledge as well. It is also a form of self-expression. This allows for the communities to express, to talk, to tell. And this self-expression is one tool that I've used a lot during my own research and thesis, of which we are going to talk about. Now, what happens when we what happens when we are centering indigenous voices? It enriches understanding through indigenous perspectives, which we lack many a times, because many a times we go with the notion we need to teach them something. They need to be developed. But is that really so? When we go with a limited knowledge and idea of who they are, of what their knowledge is like, or even the region that they are in, then the indigenous perspectives, their ideas, they absolutely get blindsided. This is where centering indigenous voices plays an important role. Encourages co-creation of knowledge with communities, recognizes region and context-specific ways of knowing, strengthens cultural continuity through inclusive practices, ensures indigenous voices guide research direction and meanings, as well as recognizes communities as equal partners in knowledge creation. This is very important. One thing I realized once I finished writing my thesis and once my thesis got published, I questioned myself, whose knowledge is this now? Because what I've written is not just my knowledge. I've been somebody who's collected those knowledge, and even though I've written it, a large chunk of what I've written is all transcriptions from the community. So now we are co-creators. We are equal partners in knowledge creation. So this is why I always say my thesis is not just my own. It's one that I've written with the communities. So when we are centering indigenous voices, the data, the entire knowledge that comes out, that gets created out of the data that we collect for the specific topic or specific knowledge that we are curious to know about, and bring it into the quote and unquote mainstream, then both the community that we've worked with and us, we become equal partners in that knowledge creation. We're going to look at 3 case studies from across the world where they've used drawings. So children's drawings in a Cree community in Canada, where they brought children and they were asked to draw whatever they saw around them. It talked about, and here the children came and they expressed and they learned so much about cultural values, food, tradition, community bonds, and this encouraged community autonomy. Children knew a lot more about their communities. They could bring about a lot of self-expression that was out there for them. Then also another one is Inuit drawings as climate memory. So we see that although this had started way back in the 60s, but even today we will see that all these drawings, all these forms of art are being used to express the climate change, blending of emotional, cultural, and observational layers, and all of that that's happening around. Because a lot of times, because when we look at the world, when indigenous people look at the world, we look at it as one holistic place that we belong to. For indigenous people, I strongly believe in, which I've heard multiple times as I went to the communities, that they are a part of nature and nature is a part of them. So any form of expression that they have, any storytelling they do, there's always a holistic approach to that, which drawings is one of the most viable tool which helps them to express visually what they are feeling and thinking. Then we also have the water mapping knowledge through drawings in the Adivasi communities in India, where when we see here in the pictures, we see that women are coming together, they are drawing, and a lot of the tools that are used here are participatory rural appraisal. And I believe that this is one of the best tools that one can use when we are working with indigenous communities. There are a lot of sub-tools that are there, like historical timeline, resource mapping, and all of that is there. And each tool, you can actually curate it for the community that you are at. And therefore, I feel like these things, when you see, it's the community people who will be able to tell you exactly what is where, exactly what is very important. Now, when you see these drawings, I'd like to narrate a story that actually happened in Rajasthan. Um, the social worker, let's call a man a social worker, he went to this village in Rajasthan, and then he saw that women, they had to travel so far to fetch waters. They had to walk for hours and hours and hours. And this man, he decided this village needs a tube well and a hand pump. And he went ahead and got that. And then he was like, oh, I am going, the whole entire village and the women are going to be so grateful to me. They're going to thank me so much because I fulfilled one of their basic needs and all of that. But the women, they were very angry and very unhappy. Why? Because now, whatever good was being done, they did not involve the community. He wanted to do good for the woman, but he did not bring the woman into the conversation. He did not bring them into confidence before doing something for the community. What happened? For the woman, that 20 minutes of going and 20 minutes of coming back, that was 40 minutes every day or an hour every day, was a time of leisure. That was the only time they could go out from their house. That was the only time they could chitter chatter. They could be free. But now that the entire water system was right there, they lost that time. Now they had to do more household chores. So this is why it is very important that we talk about and bring about community participation when we are working with any communities, but even more so when we are working with indigenous communities. Taking these 3 case studies, I'm going to share some of my stories from our mountains. But I'd like to put in a disclaimer here by telling everyone that this is a work in progress. So please extend grace if there's anything that goes wrong here. So I've been utilizing a lot of drawings that the community and we've been drawing together to tell our stories, to tell how we feel, to use drawings as a form of expressing our ideas of nature, our ideas of what narrative means and all of that. So here on the left, when we look at nature, we call it Prakriti, and I've utilized because we live in a region where we speak both Nepali as well as Rongring, which is the Lepcha language, but Rongring is now sadly only spoken in the villages. But when it comes to the towns and cities, the most common language is Nepali. That's why it's written in both the scripts. So when we talk about nature, we call it Prakriti, and then the community were like, oh, we love it. So we were like, we're going to draw a heart for it. So we were like, we drew hearts. Then we drew, oh, this is the kind of flower that we see most of the time. But then we also see that there's, over the years, we see a lot of arid places coming up. Because why do we see arid places? Because there was a lot of agricultural practices, which was solely leaning towards cash crop. And for the region, it was cardamom. What happened is, cardamom sadly happens to be a plant that only yields for about 5 years very well. After that, and while it yields, it just destroys the soil completely. And after that, it's of no use. The plant is of no use, the soil is of no use. So a lot of arid places came up and people started talking about it. And that's how we started drawing these pictures. Now, why did we draw a triangle? We drew a triangle because we are like, oh, we are all a part of it. Man, our land, our nature, all of it. And that's how that was all communities and young people that we came together and drew. Even when it comes to farsyong, we call it narratives. And that's how we came up with all these pictures and drawings, all of that. And the colors were something that we chose as a community together. The idea of what we can draw, what we can put, the lines. Somebody just randomly came up and we're like, we'll do this, we'll do that. Can we draw a square? Can we do this? Can we do that? And this was one of the best ways, which brought about a lot of trust building in the community, but at the same time also could give us a lot of idea about how the community in visual ways and places views themselves and views the idea of what we are talking about in their heads. Now, this is one picture that I drew, taking into consideration all that we learned from the community. And this was for a project and a workshop that I did called the Sacred Landscapes. And I'll show you a video later on where a lot more about this picture is going to be talked about. Then we are also talking about, again here, we were talking about land, we were talking about how the land is deteriorating, how our rivers are being pushed to the back, and how when we look at the rivers, even the rivers are full of silt. It's not getting that enough space to flow because of the dams. And how that is absolutely affecting our communities, affecting our ecology, affecting our land was something that we drew. And the topography of our region is already a very earthquake-prone zone. It's a very young hill. And then with all the dams that are being built, we saw that this is how we look at our land. These are the colors that we see. This is how we believe our land is evolving. And this is another picture. This is a picture that I drew without taking the community on board, but this is an expression of what was happening in the community. In the last, this was done last, I think, a year and a half back, when we had, when the Tista swelled up, and a lot of the land and a lot of the villages were all taken and washed away by the river. And that happened because of the dams that are out there. So here this is all the mountains that we have. We used colors, thinking about what the community had thought before, and our mountains becoming more blunter day by day. And how when we look here, we see a lot of people being washed away and all our ecology deteriorating. So using lines, using all of these things was one of the ways where we've been collecting data, where we have been how do I put it? Where we have been conserving our stories, where we have been conserving our ideas, our thoughts, so that when it comes, so that they also become conversation starters, but at the same time, every community member gets to be a part of telling this story. And I'd like to also give a big shout out to Discovering Sacred Lands. It's a Mutangche Rongkup community-based knowledge creation. I had a big opportunity to be a part of this. And the work that I showed initially about finding sacred land is a part of work and a project that I worked with them, and I did it. Now, this is a place where we come together and we tell our own stories. The communities tell their own stories, be it through art, be it through any form of medium that the person chooses to use. And this has been one of the best, I would say, places which has encouraged young people like me, and I'm sure some of them are here in the meeting as well, to tell our own stories, to be involved as a community, to involve the communities, to tell our stories, to be the story, and also to participate and create histories as well as historical records of what is happening today in our communities. Because if you look at indigenous stories and indigenous knowledge keeping, indigenous practices, they are not redundant the way people assume them to be. Rather, they are evolving with time. They attach and cling themselves with the surrounding that they are with the time that they are with, and it continues to evolve. Something gets added, something gets removed, but it continues to evolve. So having a space and a place to tell your story, to come together, to use art, to use colors, to use lines, to use whatever is available out there in the communities, to come and tell all of those things. And it's not necessary that you have to draw. Some of these things we didn't draw. We used leaves, we used twigs, we used everything that was available in the communities to draw on the ground, took pictures, and later on, like, we translated those into drawings such as these as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to show you a short video about how I've used drawings to tell a story and use it as a narrative of recording history of what is there, what is happening, and what could happen as well. Okay. Sound.
Mo, thank you for being here and welcome to my presentation titled And the Mountain Echoes. The journey of finding the meaning of sacred and sacred land has been introspective and very nurturing for myself. As I share my journey, I hope our hearts are attuned and the stories ruffle your hearts just the way it did mine. The beginning and the end of a Lepcha life is rooted in the mountains. The creation story of the Lepchas, created from snow by our creator Itupmo, is deeply embedded in our Lepcha narratives and hearts. Mountains are not only our homes, but also our sacred land. The mountains in the picture is my homage to our mountains. It also represents the different phases of Lepcha life and journey over the years. The first picture represents the Lepcha creation, our beginning. The second picture is the reflection of Lepchas, all attuned and at one breath with the mountains before the in-migration and the colonial rule. The third mountain represents our mountain ecosystem, of who Lepchas have been stewards and custodians for years. And the final picture reflects our current situation of blunt stagnation we are in with the ecosystem around us. Over the years, our ears have become detuned to the call of the mountains, but the mountains' echo and the reverberating sound has reached our hearts and soul. The mountains have over the years gone through transformations, and so have we. But the call remains the same. The call to be stewards of nature, children of the mountains, all echo in the air. Mountains are not a totem, but home for us, and our home is calling. Heeding to the call of the mountains, with Achule in our songs, our words, our conversations, let's carry forward the echo and bring clarity to our Lepcha narratives. Just like a wolf in sheep's clothing, they were set to damn our future by disrupting our ecology in the mask of development. Our land has been degrading and diminishing day by day. Nature's free fall and free flow has been tampered with. With the ever-growing greed, our wants come at the cost of our future. The mountain calls for us to take action, heed to her warnings, and take ownership of what is ours. The artwork here represents the rivers and the forts that have been tampered with. The green plant pushed to the corner is our ecology. The mountain represents the mountain ecology which has been disrupted. The black background is because of how dark our future seems with the dams being built and the uncertainty of a man-made disaster it has brought along with it. Yet there is the sun and there is this technicolor ray flying and floating through the darkness, which represents the people of all different race, color, religion, caste, with people with different ideas all coming together as one to make an ecological difference here in the hills. The human silhouette represents the affected citizens of Teesta and the tiny group of Lepchas who have the courage to stand up and let their inner eco-consciousness shine through to create a movement of change. All that counts is the truth. Without it, you're basically just juggling people's draft ideas, Jojo Moyes. For the longest time, we have been juggling the idea that taking care of our ecology in compartments of land, mountains, river, and flora and fauna is enough. But the truth is that these ecologies are intertwined, codependent, and symbiotic. Not just that, we humans are also joined at the hip with ecology at large, for we are at the center of it all. An idea which is enforced and reinforced by our ancestors. The artwork here represents the compartmentalization of land, river, mountains, and flora and fauna. But the yellow sun represents hope, hope to seek truth, find truth, and to honor the truth. What we juggle henceforth determines the health as well as wealth of our ecology here in the hills. Reverting back to our indigenous knowledge and practices of honoring ecology brings to light the truth that will set us free from juggling borrowed ideas of nurturing our ecology. The beginning of today, supported by the foundation of yesterday and the hope of tomorrow, is the way forward. One cannot leave behind one's indigenous knowledge and hope to resolve issues of today, for the issues of today stems out of unattended issues of the past. No matter how uphill the battle of ecological reconstruction may seem, our indigenous ecological knowledge, rooted in both person in environment and environment in person approach, is the torchbearer for the road ahead. The artwork here represents the changing ecology blurred by the passage of time, fluidity of space and time, as well as the possibilities of the unknown tomorrow. The treasure chest of potential in each of us is radiant and enough to engulf the best of every world out there. Let us tap into our inner indigenous self and allow our ancestral knowledge to guide us through. The dawn is here, and the dawn is you and me. During the course of searching for sacred land, I looked towards the mountains, the rivers, the land, the flora and fauna, the community, our indigenous knowledge, and even the pressing concerns of today, but to no avail. My heart always yearned for home. It is only towards the end of my journey did I think of looking into myself. Lo and behold, I found something sacred. I realized The center of my being is filled with potential, power, and energy. My ancestors and our stories live within me. The cycle of change never stops. Likewise, the passing of ancestry and heritage is a continuous process. This design is a representation of my consciousness towards the journey of finding sacred land. The center is the human being with all its potential and energy. The moon and its circles represents the cycle of change in all shapes, designs, and form. The blue cloud represents the night. The blue represents water and the green curves represents the water dragon. The design is clear in some and muddy in others, which represents the consciousness and awareness of the dragon seeking to guide us through. This is a concept which I learned during the workshop. The purple represents human greed and need, and the various lines represents people and their rat race. The color gradations here are to represent the degree of greed. The other blue is the snow melting and the effects of global warming. At the edge is our environment, which has been pushed to the corner by all our needs and wants. Some spaces don't even have the green because we have completely left our ecology from a developmental progress. And finally, we have the yellow clouds in the purple region to show hope that even in all our greed, we still have the consciousness shining in us. There are some lights there to show how this eco energy in us definitely is shining through slowly but surely. And the rainbow represents hope that someday our light, our energy will guide us back to the center of our ecological being. Sacredness stems from within me, and the knowledge of it is not enough, for knowledge does not always transfer into action. Acceptance, acknowledgement, and ownership of the sacredness within me is what I've learned and discovered in this journey of mine. Thank you for coming along in this path of discovery. You are a narrative and so am I. Our stories are being carried by the wind and echoed by the mountains. Let us pause to listen, embrace.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for holding patience to watch that. This is a particular video that we created, and it is a part of my research and thesis. So this, whatever you heard right now, is the data analysis of what I worked for my thesis, which was titled Conservation of Ecology Through Indigenous Knowledge Systems, a study on the Lepchas in the Himalayan region of West Bengal. So the entire information that is out there, the knowledge that we talked about in the entire narrative that we talked about in the entire video, I do not claim it to be mine, because it is a story that the community and we wrote together, we built together. And there's one particular, there are two particular sentences that has stayed with me, and I'd like to share that and end my presentation. One is, knowledge does not always necessarily transfer into action. Knowledge is there. It does not necessarily always transfer into action. So it is very important for us to find ways to transfer it into action, to bring it into action. And when it comes to Indigenous studies, when it comes to Indigenous communities, this is where we have to rethink and reimagine what data collection looks like. Because for us, it's very important that the knowledge gets transferred, and it also has some action inputs at the end. The second is, this was an advice that I was told, and this was a conversation that we had, which was, the dawn is here and the dawn is you. So this is something that one of the elders in the community told me. and because we were having this heated discussion about how there is no bridge between the older generation and the younger generation, and we realized that both the generations want to come together and meet at a point, but we are unwilling to voice that, because of which we again are on two different poles and spectrums. So because of which, when I was leaving the village, when I was leaving the community, he's a very old songwriter, and then he said, you know what, it looks like change is here, it looks like the dawn is here, and that dawn is you. And for me, that was, I feel like, one of the best thing somebody could tell me, and that's something that I would like to tell you also. Because if you are looking for change, or if you're looking to bring change, if you're looking to tell our stories and not just be stories that we are talked of or told about, then I believe it's very important that we realize that we are the dawn that we are looking for in others. Until and unless I rise and I allow my light to shine through, it is not going to, nobody is going to know it, and I cannot hide it anymore. It again goes back to finding the sacred land, finding the sacredness that is within us, finding the sacredness of the knowledge, the land and the space and the place. Because if we do not find the sacred land, we will not be able to honor the knowledge that comes along with it, because our knowledge is rooted in the land that we belong to. So thank you so much for coming to my presentation, and this brings us to the end. Shalini, the time is back to you.
Thank you, Anugrah, for sharing such an insightful presentation today. It was beautiful, actually, and especially your story at the end. So it showed, the overall research, but in a beautiful manner. So I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed like how you told us about the drawing itself, right? What is drawing exactly? It's not just scribble; it's data collection. So your presentation beautifully illustrated how research can move beyond conventional frameworks to truly honor indigenous ways of knowing. And your reflections on drawing as a medium of storytelling, as a data collection, and on the importance of inclusive research that fosters community participation and shared indigenous-centric knowledge were especially inspiring. So the way you highlighted storytelling, participatory tools, and design have given us fresh perspective on how research can be both meaningful and respectful. So thank you for that, Anugrah. And before moving on to like question and answer, the floor will be open for question and answer. So people can put their questions in the chat, or if anybody is seeing the session on YouTube, they can also write the questions on the comment. So before that, I'll ask some questions from my end, Anugrah. Okay. Okay. So mainly, I would like to ask if you shared us about the indigenous context. Like, what is the difference between conventional method and the indigenous method? So in indigenous context, what adaptations are needed to make PRA tools, the participatory rural appraisal tool, more culturally relevant?
That is such a nice question. Thank you for asking that. Because when I was working, I also went out with 3 tools. I used historical timeline, then I used resource mapping and seasonal calendar and all of that. And smartly, I went to the community with all my sheets and all my questions. And I was like, today we are going to do seasonal mapping. And you know what? Seasonal mapping means this. It means how many months you do this, how many months you do that. What do you do in this? We are going to do that. It's going to be tables and it's going to be fun. And people only stared. They're like, what is this girl talking about? And that's the time I realized. And that entire day, we didn't do anything about seasonal calendar. We talked about everything. We talked about food. We talked about agriculture. We talked about seasons changing, which birds will come and sing in which season and everything. But we did not make the calendar. That night I went back and I thought, hey, how am I going to do this? My guide is going to be so upset and I am not going to get any data from here. I think that was the night I realized that everything has to be catered to the community that we're working in. I go to a village or even towns and cities and I blatantly say seasonal calendar. Nobody's going to understand. They are all going to laugh at me and they're going to just be like, "Arey, kya hai seasonal calendar?" So when you're going to communities, what is very important, I realize how you can contextualize these tools is, number one, don't go to the communities with a drawn out, laid out map because it's not going to work. First, and that is why you need to spend time with the communities. You need to have conversations with them. You need to, because one thing we must remember is indigenous communities, they look at things holistically. You ask them agriculture, they'll tell you religious practices also. So when you are doing seasonal calendars, it's very important that I'm giving example of a seasonal calendar only right now. So it's very important that you have a conversation with them first. Because when you're doing it, you're already doing an FGD, that's like a focus group discussion or something of that sort. So once you have a discussion, then you start drawing. That's where again drawing comes into play. You start drawing months, year, in the year 12 months. Then you start adding pictures here, birds, pictures of grain, pictures of what, rice or peas and things of that sort. And then you start and then you make it like a game. Because if they're older people, they'll enjoy it more and they'll be more interactive and people will engage more. So when you're doing these things, so you'll be like, okay, if rice is grown here, when do you think rice is grown? Now, one thing to again remember is you can't just go and say January, February, March. They may not understand. So another thing is very important that you know the local terms for those things. You can have somebody translate it for you and you'll be like, can we all point to this place where this thing is grown? So, or can we flock and can we all put our peas where in the months the peas are grown? And then, everybody goes and puts it there. So that's how you draw. Instead of doing it on paper, you do it on ground. You use things that are available around them. And of course, it takes quite some time, but a participatory tool takes a lot of time and we have to go with patience, especially if you're working in remote villages where people are not exposed to the kind of knowledge, structured knowledge, practices that we are aware of. So in short, I would like to say is this, that you have to go live in the community, understand the community, and do something that works best for you and the community. And for me, drawings have been an excellent form of community interaction. It became playful and it just became a place where they enjoyed, I enjoyed, full of laughter and full of information at the end. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Anugrah. Okay, there is one more question from Anupam. So, how can indigenous communities exert control over how their data is collected, stored, and shared?
Yes. I always have a very heavy heart when this comes up, because when I finished my when I finished my thesis and my thesis was published and it was there, like I said, it struck me, whose knowledge is this? Because I've written something, but the entire totality of everything is not my knowledge. It's a lot of things that I've written from the community. The community has entrusted me to tell the stories for them. But then there came a point before my defense where the professor and I, we were having a conversation and the professor was like, "Arey, this is my intellectual property." And then I got taken aback. I was like, "Arey, how is this your intellectual property? So how is this the institution's intellectual property?" No, because so who determines whose property this is now? So I think it's very important as people, all of us are here, that which basically I would like to assume that most of us are working in preserving, conserving knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems and practices, and carrying it forward. It is very important for us to acknowledge from the very beginning that this is a shared knowledge, and this is a knowledge co-created by you and the community together. So it can never just be yours. So the moment I feel, this is just my personal opinion, the moment we feel and we say that this is not just my knowledge, this is the knowledge of the community also, and we give certain ownership to the community as well, then when it comes to larger institutions and places like that, we can put a check. We can start putting a check. I cannot put a check on anybody else, but I can put a check on what I have written. Now, what the community can do. See, I feel a lot of times indigenous knowledge and information that's out there is also indigenous. See, I find this very irritating also because I experienced it myself. Indigenous community people will they restrict themselves from telling their knowledge things to the community people only. The moment a foreigner will come and say, oh, we want to write about you, they'll give all the information. What they don't know and what they don't realize is you don't know what this person is going to write about you. So it is also very important that communities should take ownership of their knowledge systems. At the same time, also be careful who they're telling their knowledge, and also hold every person who is writing about you and with whom you've shared your knowledge accountable, that they come back and then they tell you what they've written about you, how they've translated this thing. And this was another, I don't know if you remember, we had Jenny Bentley who had come and shared in one of the TDF talks, and this is something that she taught me during my research. She's like, hey, you've collected a lot of things here. It's very important you go back and you tell them. So I made a lot of pamphlets with all the pictures and all the artworks, and then that's how I sent. And this video is also something that I sent, so people know that what somebody's writing. So I feel like it's important for the community also to take responsibility, but also people who are collecting information also, they should stand on the grounds of ethical research. I don't know if that answers it, but that's how I see it.
Okay. No, I think that answered my question. And that answered Anupam's question mainly. Yeah. So I think it's already 8. So due to lack of time, I think we'll end the session here. Yeah. Because it's already 8, but yeah, I think people have many questions and they can ask you questions if they want on the YouTube as well, or if they want to connect on Tribal Design Forum as well. So there will be many opportunities. If you want to ask questions to Anugrah, she'll be happy to answer those. Okay. I think Sham just texted.
Control
Do you
of
guys have
data.
time for some more questions?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Ankush.
Hey, Anugrah. Sorry, thanks for staying back. Uh, uh, Firstly, this lovely presentation, yeah. And what you said about going on field, something this really struck. You said don't go with a map already drawn, right? And like us, architects and our students, we end up doing a lot of that. We'll go like, so we've drawn this is the boundary of the village, and you tell me, yeah, and that has always been an obstacle which we try to break down and all that. So yeah, that really struck. I kind of want to ask you, so like being the kind, I think we've had this discussion earlier as well, like being in the sort of spatial field, we are constantly seeking, like tables, right? I mean, like tabular data that can be processed. And a lot of the time, it's very hard to take all of these kind of, experiential, these intangibles, these phenomenological sort of things into a table. And because we do need that to also be, because at the end of the day, the city is designing and planning based on this data set. We are working on this data set, right? So unless that data set has this kind of tabulated, condensed data, even for this, it will not be represented. So have you seen any sort of methods to be able to translate some of these sort of more intangible things into processable like tabulated data?
That is such an interesting thing because I'm more of a qualitative researcher. And since when I work with indigenous communities, most of the things that we do, we work, everything is mostly qualitative base on qualitative basis. And one of the major reason why is because if you notice, stories change from village to village also. It's the same story. The crux is the same, but how they narrate, it changes. So that becomes a little difficult to again bring it into one single condensed form and say ki, this is it or this is the story. What that has done is in a lot of villages that I went to, what that has done is that has actually created conflicts because community A and community B, they're telling the same story, but maybe one character is different, one is added and one is removed. So then they are like, they go on a place of point of contention ki nahi, 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 this is the original story and this is the original story. So you for you to come and say, okay, we'll just write only the crux, then that also becomes an issue. But then one way, I don't know if this is going to help in doing tabular things, but one way of unifying these stories was we had a lot of mundok. They are like ethnomedicine practitioners, as well as bungtings. They are like priests. They are the ones who are moving across the same villages. So they are the ones, if you can get hold of them and if you can work with them, I feel like that is one place you can tap into to bring about condensed form of numerical data, because they'll be the ones to tell you something which is close to what is accurate.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely going to look those up. Thanks a lot.
I don't know if I answered it,
You did,
but
you did. I mean, it's something that we've been constantly like. Even it's not even just about what you put it. Like in our terms, it's also a taxonomical problem, right? Like, what
yeah,
are the things you are willing to see as a column or as
yeah,
a factor? Like, is it
yeah,
age? Is it health? Is it condition? Is
yes,
it gender? Whatever. So I think yeah, it does make a lot of sense to kind of try and look at it that way.
yes.
Yeah.
You have to look at people who are common denominators in all the villages.
Hmm.
Because when you talk about health, also one thing that can be put into columns. Health is something that is done, and health, age, sex ratio, and all of that. No,
Yeah.
you will see and you'll realize, especially in the hills, 3 villages will have only one health center. Now, what
Hmm.
happens is people are not going to move across because the distance is too large. You don't want to walk. You
Hmm.
have to walk. You have to walk for 45 minutes to go here, go there. So the number of data that you get in the health center will also be inaccurate. So
Hmm.
one of the best thing is to find the person who keeps moving in all 3 villages.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me of the book. I mean, the story in the book is also that, right? Thanks a
Shalini?
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think your answer answered my question as well. One of the question that you said that every other region have different story. Like the crux is same, but they have some kind of differences. But how to address that? So yeah, I think even that answered that. Okay. So thank you, Anugrah, and thank you, Ankush, as well. For now, I think we'll end the session here. And if anybody has any question, yeah, I think they can contact Anugrah on the community or through the chat as well. So now I'll announce tomorrow's session. So tomorrow we shall have Padma Angmo speaking on the topic the fall of love, habitat, and biodiversity. Padma Angmo is the first woman poet in English from Ladakh. Her debut poetry and prose collection, Ruler of Sky, blends poetry and science fiction, exploring ecological grief, climate action, and humanity's deep connection with nature. A former journalist with Times Now and the Information Department, UT Ladakh, she has also served as a consultant from Ernst and Young contributing to Ladakh's sustainable tourism policy. Her forthcoming children's book featuring artwork by children with disabilities promotes inclusive storytelling. Through workshops and guest lectures in Ladakh, she fosters environmental awareness, education, and creative expression among the youth. The session will be at 7 p.m. Tomorrow. And yeah, okay. So there is another session by Zero Gonzalez. Okay, so he's a photographer from Cusco, Peru, and he'll be presenting about documenting my indigenous culture. So his session will be at 9 p.m. That will be tomorrow itself. Yes. So about him, Zero Gonzalez is a graduate of Centro de la Imagine. After finishing his studies, he returned to Cusco to start personal projects related to ethnography and Andean landscape. Parallel to his personal work, he organizes and develops visual education workshops with children and young people from Quechua-speaking communities, where the visual arts become an excuse to address issues of identity and cultural heritage. As a photographer, he has a deep interest in territory and Quechua language. The use of analog cameras allows him to realize new visual possibilities through the exploration and combination of ancient and modern processes in the production of images. So you can join in the sessions which you're interested in. That will be at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. And thank you to all the attendees for giving questions and, attending the session so thoughtfully and listening to it. And also, if anybody wants to join in the Tribal Design Forum, the forum is open for registration, and all the joining process information can be found on our website, tribaldesignforum.com. And the event calendar for the month is up on the tribaldesignforum.com, and you can choose from the calendar to attend the sessions of your liking to discover the world of tribes in transition. Thank you, and good night for tonight. Johar, everyone.